This is Sports Jam. I'm Doug Doyle. It's certainly football season, and back in June, the former president of the latest version of the United States Football League, Brian Woods, announced that he has ambitious plans to launch a spring 11-on-11 name, image, likeness friendly, independent high school football league in 2024. The Prep Super League is planning for a 6-week season with NCAA rules that runs from April 19th through May 24th across 12 cities in 8 states. And joining us on Sports Jam to talk about the Prep Super League is the CEO and founder, Brian Woods. Great to see you, Brian.
Great to be with you, Doug.
Joining us from Bergen County, you're home now.
That's correct. I'm in Bergen County, specifically Upper Saddle River, New Jersey.
Brian, you grew up in a football crazy state of Florida. So it's been in your blood for a long time. And now, as we mentioned, you're based in New Jersey. That will be one of the states involved in the Prep Super League, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we do have a good amount of prep high school football talent here in this area, which I don't think New Jersey gets enough credit for. But certainly with Bergen Catholic and Don Bosco and some of the programs just here in the general vicinity, we think that in some of the various public schools here in the local area, definitely could be very supportive and have a good talent base to be part of the initial membership.
Not every executive gets to check off all the boxes when it comes to a resume and a sport that you love and have been an executive of. But yours does. You have set yourself up success as an executive. You were a walk-on safety at Ole Miss, spent time as a coach, graduate assistant coach at Iowa State. You interned with the Jets, working on salary cap matters, and spent 5 years as an agent. You also found time to get a law degree from West Virginia University. So before we talk about the specifics of the new league, let's go back to those days at Ole Miss. Walking onto a Division I football program is not easy. So what lessons did you learn from that experience?
I think, well, first and foremost, right out of high school, I had an opportunity to go to a Division II school in Ohio, but my dream was really to play Division I football. And I felt like, I was talented enough to realize that, and had an opportunity. And it was the opportunity at the time was the University of Mississippi had come under scrutiny by the NCAA for some things that had violated rules. And they were in a position where they were losing a lot of scholarships. And because of that, they needed walk-ons. They needed more walk-ons than probably most SEC programs. And so this was my opportunity, if you will, or my foray into playing major Division I football, and Ole Miss provided me with that opportunity. Unfortunately, my career did not amount to what I wanted it to, but certainly I probably learned more from not realizing that opportunity to really fulfill my chance to get on the field there at the University of Mississippi. But I certainly learned a lot about just being resilient and perseverance, and just playing and participating in a team environment like that. So we actually had an Ole Miss, a member of the Ole Miss Alumni Association here at my house last night for dinner and some drinks with myself, wife, and the children. And so Ole Miss has a very special place in my heart, and it was a great experience for me. And it definitely, I think, prepared me well for my future career.
Absolutely. And you can put your mind into the helmets of these young high school players. You know what that, has all been about. So you said that the Prep Super League will help players navigate the NIL landscape at a time when not all states and high school associations are actually welcoming that topic. Can you explain that a little bit more?
I think part of the catalyst for the Prep Super League, there was a number of environmental factors that led me to create this. I'm entrepreneurial, as you know, for the better part of the past decade. I've been creating sports properties, and including the Spring League, which was a more or less a de facto D League for the NFL, and then most recently the new iteration of the United States Football League. So I was the president of that, but I was also the founder of that, and so and was able to sell both those properties and exit successfully, with my relationship with Fox Sports. But ultimately what I would tell you is part of the catalyst for creating the Prep Super League was that, NIL is such a new phenomenon. I think the idea of creating the Prep Super League 5 years ago would have been a good business model, in that there is a multitude of travel and club sports. The proliferation of club sports and travel sports in the United States has really gotten big as parents put money into, their son or daughter in pursuit of that all coveted athletic scholarship. But what's really interesting is that there really isn't and hasn't been a supplemental platform to traditional 11 on 11 football. So we thought that there was a void there. But ultimately, I also needed a catalyst, if you will, to attract that star player. And so with more and more states affording opportunities in the NIL world to their high school student athletes, I thought, hey, this is the perfect time to launch a property like this. The unfortunate thing is, and especially in some of the big football states like Florida and Texas, there is still many jurisdictions that don't allow NIL. And so I wanted to create a national league so that players could participate in my league and take part in NIL, whether or not their state high school association allowed it or not, because ultimately it's a state-by-state decision. But because we have a national league, we're not subject to state policy. And so I wanted to put and give an opportunity, or provide an opportunity rather, to all of these high school age student athletes, because I felt like if college athletes are given the opportunity, high school athletes should have the same. And now the majority of states have it, but there's still several that don't. And so the Prep Super League really kind of served to fill that void.
So you have New Jersey, as you mentioned, Miami, Phoenix, San Diego, San Francisco, Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, LA, Cleveland, Tampa. It really is across the country. When you think about this league actually also supplementing recruiting camps on those 7-on-7 programs, that can work out as well, right?
I think, look, at the end of the day, and I tell people this all the time, but 7-on-7 should be viewed no more than a drill. That's what 7-on-7 is. It's a drill, and it's something that players can get good at, but it should be viewed as nothing more than that. And what I mean by it is that ultimately they're missing some very valuable components when you play 7-on-7, and mainly the offensive and defensive linemen. But more importantly, the quarterbacks don't really see a live pass rush. The wide receivers catch the ball knowing full and well no one's going to hit them. Linebackers take zone drops that you would never see them take in a real football context. And so I think that having 11-on-11 football, especially in the time of year when all the Division I programs are out recruiting, making scholarship offers to promising student athletes, there should be something supplemental in nature out there. And that was, again, a big reason for the creation of the Prep Super League. But I also think that the football world has become so diluted in terms of 7-on-7. It used to be a very prestigious thing to participate in one of those. Now every high school, every state, every college, university, they all have some form of 7-on-7. But ultimately, it's not a very good evaluation tool. And so this is real football. It's 11-on-11. It's contact. And so I think that, of course, we should be seen supplemental to traditional high school football. But I think we have carved out a really nice area, or a really nice part of the calendar to exist and provide an additional opportunity for the top players.
And this doesn't have to be 5-star and 4-star recruits, right? There's opportunities for others in this.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of lost in our initial media launch, if you will. It was a lot of focus on the 4- and 5-star just because we mentioned NIL. And so they just assume that every player coming in is, being paid in some form or fashion. And quite the contrary, we do think that a good majority of our rosters will be these star players, but we also feel like we can put a core of athletes around them, mainly 2- and 3-star kids, guys that we've identified as having a skill set. They've been overlooked, or otherwise players that we feel like we can develop and turn these guys into 4- and 5-star players respectively. So we're bringing in coaches that all have NCAA or NFL experience. So we feel like giving players that sort of level of instruction will certainly allow some of these players to increase their not just their experience or provide that experience to them, but definitely give them opportunities to play with better talent, which in turn a lot of times does accelerate that player's development, but more importantly, put them with the best teachers and instructors.
And thus putting them in with great teachers and instructors. So it kind of leads me into this question too, though. More and more football, everybody knows that naturally comes the risk of possible injuries, but you are addressing that concern.
We are addressing the concern in a multitude of ways. And one of them is, look, first and foremost, we're going to exist from mid-April to late May. That's it. It's a 6-week season. Our practices are going to resemble NFL regular season practices. As a matter of fact, I have been in touch with the NFL on a few occasions already to kind of discuss with them best practices, sort of their medical protocols, what their collective bargaining agreement allows. So we want to kind of follow, we want to have enough content. We want to have enough contact rather to make sure it's valuable for the offensive and defensive linemen and we get good instructional work. But we really don't want players being injured during practice. We want to keep injuries to a minimum. We've also looked at, we're going to play NCAA rules football, but we've also looked at possibilities of deviating a little bit, which is to say maybe modifying our kickoff and doing some other things to make the game safer, including potentially adding a running clock. So anything we can do to make the game safer for our participants, that's what we're about. But more importantly, here's what else I would say, Doug, that people were missing out on. They immediately thought that, well, these are going to be additional games that these players take part in. My position is we will have players that come to us this year, some of the top juniors that have committed to schools by December of their junior year, have entered into the early signing period by their junior year. And we'll decide, you know what? I'm going to make the Prep Super League my senior season. I'm going to have less wear and tear in my body. If I get injured, I'm going to have a full year to recuperate. But all the top players right now want to be on campus by January. So they're going to focus on academics in the summer and the fall, and then be in a position to contribute to their college team by the spring of what would have been the spring of their senior year. And so that is something that I think has been lost. The concept has been lost on a lot of people. But we do have some players that will probably come in most likely and use the Prep Super League as their senior season. And I think it's beneficial on a lot of fronts.
Well, even though it's been out there and people have been talking about it, I don't think the average person really understands name, image, and likeness. Can you kind of, especially in when it comes to the Prep Super League, can you explain it a little bit more for, in layman's terms, what it means to the athlete?
Yeah, I mean, look, first and foremost, it's really ultimately your personal brand. That's what it is. One of the companies that I speak to on a fairly regular basis that goes around and educates the college students, and they sign up a lot of universities around the country, and they educate the college student athlete on name, image, and likeness. They conducted a recent poll. Over 80% of the respondents said that likeness was how much you were actually liked, so by other people. So even the athletes themselves don't fully comprehend what name, image, and likeness is. But I can tell you, it's really about your personal brand. It's about your image. It's about how you're seen in terms of marketing and branding and so on and so forth. And so the one thing about the Prep Super League that's really unique is that players can take part in the Prep Super League in states that don't currently allow NIL for high school athletes. And of course, you could be looking at an eligibility issue with their own state association, but a player that's coming in and taking compensation for their name, image, and likeness has made a decision that, hey, listen, my state doesn't currently allow it, but I'm going to participate in this league because they do allow it. And I can also be able to participate with no restrictions, because even in the states where NIL is currently afforded to high school athletes, there's still a multiple number of restrictions they put in place. And so one thing we're not going to have is restrictions. So you're going to be able to, wear your uniform in conjunction with an NIL campaign. You're going to be able to take part in NIL campaigns and promotion with the Prep Super League. We also feel like, Doug, that ultimately this is a national league. So players should be seen as 1 in 600 versus 1 in a million, which is the traditional number of high school football participation each year. So just the simple fact that you're playing in a national league, you're going to be elevated. You're going to increase your personal brand. So even the player that comes into the league that might not take part in a NIL deal with the Prep Super League or in conjunction with the Prep Super League participation, they are absolutely increasing their personal brand. That's going to make them more valuable when they look at NIL deals when they arrive on their respective college campuses. So there's a lot of really positive things in terms of NIL and increasing NIL value for an individual player by participating in the Prep Super League.
We're speaking with Brian Woods here on Sports Jam. He is the president and CEO of the new league that will be coming out, and it is the Prep Super League, spanning 6 weeks with NCAA rules, running from April 19th through May 24th across 12 cities in 2024. Brian, covering high school football, doing play-by-play of it many years ago for a good while, I've run into high school coaches, who are extremely helpful when it comes to getting their players to the next level. And then other coaches that maybe, I don't know whether it could be jealousy or they don't have the time, don't really pursue helping them. Have you experienced that as well, and how the high school coach has been reacting to the Prep Super League?
Yeah, I think, listen, for the most part, when we announced, there was definitely some ambivalence in the football world. I think for the players and parents, people were excited because here was another opportunity being presented. And as I mentioned again to the star player, NIL deals certainly are going to be more fruitful by taking part in the Prep Super League. In terms of the responses we got, or the responses that we at least saw in the media from various high school coaches around the country, I believe that some of the coaches that responded did so without really getting all the information about our league first. And I think the ones that were a little smarter just said, hey, I need to know a little bit more before I make any sort of decision. So I think immediately there was concern that we would be, taking their players from them. And I said, well, first of all, there's only a handful of states that have spring football. More importantly, we think this could be supplemental to traditional high school football. So let's say, for instance, you are a top quarterback, but you played behind maybe an All-American the season before, but next year you're being looked at as the starting quarterback for your high school, and you're being counted on to step right in and play. The idea that you could put your quarterback in the Prep Super League, they could get some real game experience against really talented players, see a live pass rush developed way more than anything they're going to see with 7-on-7. They should see that as a very positive thing in enhancing their own program. And so I think that, this notion that we're coming in and we're going to take the top players, I think that is, it's unfortunate because we're really here to be supplemental in nature, I would think. And I would also tell you too, in a lot of our markets, we've had a lot of, well-seasoned high school coaches reach out to us and offer their assistance, including, wanting to take part in the coaching staff. So overall, I think it's been very positive. But I just think that, look, anytime you're doing something different, you're disrupting the current landscape, there's going to be individuals out there that feel threatened. And I think that's where a lot of the comments were coming from, just a place of feeling threatened. But, what we've been doing the last several months, outreach to various, high school coaches and programs around the country, to reassure them that we're here to be supplemental, but we also feel like that we have a business and it's a good one. And this is something that we feel like should have been out there many years ago.
And with that in mind, the excitement from, as you mentioned, with players and coaches and parents, the league plans on launching an app, right, to see all and stream all the action.
That's going to be something that we're extremely excited about, Doug, because we are launching our own direct-to-consumer platform. We will have our own app. We've partnered with a number of companies that are going to give us some really unique technological benefits and allow us to distribute our games in a form that no one's ever seen before. So number one, we've partnered with a company called Phoenix. So we will be able to, fans that watch our games will be able to see our games in sub-second latency. And that's something even the pro sports leagues aren't doing right now. So literally you watch our game, you're going to be watching it in real time. The other thing we've done is we're partnering with a data tracking company that's going to allow us to have real-time data being shown. We're going to have a sensor in the football, sensor in shoulder pads. These are some of the things we're going to be doing have not been done in college football yet, let alone never been done in high school football. So this will not be, when you watch a Prep Super League game, it will not look like a traditional high school football game. We're also looking, like as I mentioned before, to potentially have a running clock so we can make the format a little quicker, because ultimately we do feel like there's a media play here with this league, and we're hoping to attract that younger audience. So anything we can do on that front, including bringing in some really unique technological capabilities into our first season, we're going to do.
You mentioned earlier, you're a league creator and you were able to, to be successful at this. Maybe let's take the USFL. What was one thing that you look at as a great positive of that league, and then something you look back and say, something could have been done differently?
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, anytime you're creating something that's supplemental in nature, and that's really what the USFL was. It was going to be, a new spring football league, provide additional opportunities to um, players that are aspiring to play in the NFL, but more importantly, find some maybe undiscovered talent. I think the one accomplishment I'm the most proud of is just that we were able to get the league up in such a short period of time in its first year. And the product, for all intents and purposes, looked really good for season one. In terms of season two, they were competing against the XFL. And ultimately, I think they're all fighting over the same player, which is that guy that just hasn't made it in the NFL yet. Hasn't caught on after he's cut from an NFL training camp. So there were certainly some philosophical differences after the first season between myself and the people over at Fox. And part of it was my vision was to go after younger players. I wanted to get players from the transfer portal. You got all these players that are going into the transfer portal every year. 1 in 5 of these guys goes into the transfer portal on scholarship and then transfers to a Division I program as a walk-on. So I saw that as a real opportunity for us because we had a program that would allow our current players to finish their degrees, even start and complete a master's degree. And so because of that, because we had that educational opportunity and these players were given that opportunity for, free of charge, I said, well, we should be going after younger players. We should be going after, players in the transfer portal and potentially cultivating talent even before the NFL can get their hands on it. So that was one of the differences, I guess, in opinion. And so I felt like, unfortunately, nothing was done differently in season two, and they're competing against another entity, which is another, spring football operation in the XFL. And as of yesterday, there was, some rumors about a potential merger, but ultimately it's a hard, landscape to exist in and thrive. And so I think both entities probably see that if we don't do this, we may not survive. And so it was still a great experience for me, but one where my vision was a little bit different in terms of where we were going, in terms of the talent we were trying to procure, ultimately.
You brought up the transfer portal, and I'm curious to know, we know that it's exciting for the athletes and the opportunities. What has it meant to the game of college football? We see programs like Colorado now, and
sure.
What are your thoughts on that? USC had a completely different roster last year.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think to me, it resembles NFL free agency. It's really, there's no loyalty to any program at this point. It's really, where can I go that offers me the best opportunity to play? That's what the transfer portal was supposed to be initially. But then very quickly, because of NIL legislation and the proliferation rather of NIL, it became, where can I go that they give me more money? And honestly, just talking to some of the Division I coaches that I know here in the off season, a lot of deals that are happening out there, no one ever hears about. And because, I know that one Big Ten school was recruiting an offensive lineman. They lost him to a Pac-12 school. And that player was offered basically, a 3-year deal at $100,000 plus a year in some sort of NIL component through a donor-led collective. So it's really become a free agency market, or it resembles rather NFL free agency right now. And I think it's difficult. It's going to be extremely difficult for the lesser, if you want to call them group of five, and the lesser known Division I programs to see any sort of success, because the way I see it, the University of Houston's, if you will, or the Appalachian States, or the, even the smaller Division I programs out there, like the Wake Forest of the world, I don't think that any player that goes to a let's say Division I school right out of high school that's not in the Power Five, he realizes that if I'm in a bigger program, I have more NIL opportunities, right? So I think it's hard for those schools to secure a player and then keep that player if, in fact, that player ends up really developing and coming into his own. And so I think NIL, to some extent, is become the new world of NFL free agency, but it's also going to lead to some continuity issues, as you pointed out.
You are working now with the high school athletes, and when I watch a game, I recently watched, I believe it was Notre Dame and NC State. The quarterbacks for the respective teams were 24 and 23 years old, and both had stellar careers at other schools. You mentioned Wake Forest, Notre Dame's quarterback transferred. like in their sixth season of college football. That takes away big opportunities for young kids coming into the program, right?
And that was another reason for the Prep Super League. I had looked at what was happening with the transfer portal. I was following, the billions of dollars that were flowing through the major conferences. And I thought, okay, I can create something here that should have media value, especially if we go into the markets that historically have produced the most amount of talent each year, whether that be NCAA Division I rosters and Power Five conferences, whether that be opening day rosters, around the NFL. So I thought there was a real play there. But more importantly, another one of the factors that I identified was the reduction in scholarships finding their way to high school players, due in part to the transfer portal. So because of the transfer portal, I'm a college coach now. I can simply say, you know what? I'm going to go into the transfer portal and get a more experienced player. I'm going to select a more experienced player at the quarterback position, defensive end position, whatever it may be, in lieu of signing a high school player. And that has led to, over the last 2 years, a reduction roughly of 400 to 500 fewer scholarships per year over the last 2 years, finding their way to high school players. So again, I said to myself, the Prep Super League can now maybe put players in a position where they can be more visible, that can prepare them better for the college game because there's going to be increased level of competition. We can expose them to a higher level of coaching, and have these players really ready to play that game, so colleges aren't so nervous, especially with that lower tier 3-star player, that they're going to say, you know what, we'd rather go with the kid in the transfer portal. So that was, I think you're right to point that out because it's critical, and it was also another catalyst for the formation of the Prep Super League.
Brian Woods could rest on his laurels and just, the leagues that you have created. But what motivates you to continue to want to do new things and things that require a lot of work, Brian?
Yeah, I think, look, once you're entrepreneurial in nature, which I really feel like I am, and I've always been a risk taker. That's just the way I live. My wife is not so keen on that, especially now that we have 3 kids. But I've just, that's my thing, and I like creating. That's really part of my issue. I think when I left the USFL is that after I launched the USFL, I don't want to say I became bored very quickly, but certainly I was looking for my next challenge, if you will. And so I'm all about creating opportunity, finding voids in the current sports landscape. The other thing is I've got a pretty good resume, as you pointed out, in terms of understanding what goes into creating these properties, knowing what the pitfalls are, having gone through all the trials and tribulations myself. So I feel like if there's anybody out there that can create a new football league and say, I'm serious about this, and I have the requisite skill set to do it, I feel like I'm the guy that can go out there and execute it. And so, again, this was just another opportunity that I saw. And I think this will definitely be my last property that I create. But one thing I would certainly point out to you, and I tell people this all the time, I enjoyed what I did over the last several years and the properties that I was creating. I have never been more excited about anything than I've been about the Prep Super League in terms of, creating something new. And probably because, Doug, no one's ever done this before. No one's ever created a national high school league. And we think that not only can this model be very useful in the football world, we also believe that we can ultimately add more sports to this platform. So there could be more sports that come in under the Prep Super League umbrella, in the near term.
So the last question here on Sports Jam. For the very first game of the Prep Super League, you're allowed to go back in time, and you have 3 seats next to you. Who are you bringing? And you can't include family in this. Who are you bringing to this game that's so important to you, the launching of your league, that would sit next to you, and why?
Well, that's the hardest question. I'm glad you saved it last. Well, I think, ultimately, I'd probably want to have somebody there that appreciates sport and understands just how powerful sport is, and what sport can do, and just the lives that sport can change. And so, to me, it feels like it's some sort of combination of Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, and maybe somebody like Paul Brown, who was a real innovator in the world of football. I'm a big believer that had it not been for the AFL, the NFL might not still be here today. And the AFL was very progressive. The AFL brought the forward pass, which, before that time, the NFL was really more or less a running league. But everything from the quarterback to coach communication system to the modern face mask, all of these things were developed by Paul Brown. So I see him not only as a great football mind, but somebody that was also very entrepreneurial, but could appreciate what I was doing with football. So Paul Brown would be there, Muhammad Ali would be there, and either Nelson Mandela or some other political figure.
So you can see from the answer to that question how Brian's mind works. It's right on the spot. He comes up with a spectacular answer to a very just bizarre type of question. Brian Woods, congratulations on all your past success. And now with the Prep Summer League coming up in 2024, we appreciate your time here on Sports Jam.
Absolutely, Doug. It's been a real pleasure.
Sports Jam is a WBGO Studios production. You can hear all the past shows by going to wbgo.org/sportsjam or wbgo.org/studios. You can also find Sports Jam with Doug Doyle on the NPR list of podcasts or wherever you hear podcasts. Special thanks going out this week to Joe Favorito for hooking us up with Brian Woods. Until our next Sports Jam session, I'll see you at the game.